And welcome to Because Liberty. I'm your host, Curtis Hart. And today on Because Liberty, we have a very special guest with us, a man by the name of Arvin Vora. He is the Vice Chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. And we're going to be asking him about a few things that are going down in libertarian circles right about now. It's his, posting and thoughts on the military and everybody's reaction to them. So we're going to be checking out the interview that I did with him here in just a little bit. But before that, let's give a little backstory. So a couple days ago, Arvin posted on his Facebook wall picture from a Facebook, Twitter, social media account that goes by the name of Anarchy Ball, which I just love. Anarchy Ball is great. He posted something from Anarchy Ball, and seems like the military lovers in the Libertarian Party just freaked out. So, like I pointed out in the interview, the Libertarian Party after this last election got a huge influx of Republicans and conservatives. And with that comes their basic bootlicking nature. Their absolute just love of the military, everything military. The military can't do anything wrong. You can't speak out against the military. You just hate America. You know, those types of people just flooded our party. And so now that they're in our party and they're trying to help, they hear some of these messages that they're not used to hearing because they're not in their echo chamber anymore. And they just lose their minds, just freaking out, saying that, Arvin needs to quit. Arvin needs to drop out of the party. He needs to give up his seat as the vice chair. He's detrimental to the party, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, these are all things that I hear almost on a daily basis. Just wait till the election time rolls around, and you can vote him on out if you don't like him. Personally, I agree with him, and the people that are saying that he's out there being detrimental to the party, like, I guess that's just your point of view, because I talk to a lot of people that have that exact same mindset, and so from our point of view, if you agree with that, there's nothing wrong with saying it. That's just how it is. So, when you're a party that is fundamentally anti-war, anti-force, anti-initiating force, it shouldn't be that big of a surprise that people aren't huge fans, or at least all of us aren't huge fans of the military. Shouldn't be that big of a surprise at all, really. And a lot of the people, they simply, from what I've noticed, they're acting like snowflakes. They just melt at any dissent, any ill speaking of the military-industrial complex at all, and they take it on as a personal attack on the military themselves, which I just find humorous in and of itself. That's just my personal take on it. I think that that's funny. It very much shows, like a lot of these people, they're freaking out. And they're like, well, you're welcome for your right to say this kind of dribble. And then they start screaming about how they're fighting for my rights to say this. And then they tell me to shut up, basically. A lot of the people throw in, like, if you never served, then you should just shut up. Please. That's ridiculous. If you really did fight for my rights to say all this, then you fought for my rights to say this, and you have the right to just turn me off and not listen to me if you don't like me. And I very much suggest people do that. If you don't like hearing what I say, don't watch my videos. Block me on social media. And it would just save you a lot of time and heartache, it seems like, because a lot of people just seem to freak out over what's said on social media a lot of times. They take it so personally, which is what happened here. It's a lot of people freaking out saying that, Arvin is detrimental to the party, but like I mentioned in the interview to him, when I went and looked on the social media and on the YouTube and just Google News, I couldn't find anything about this. Nothing. But if you go on pretty much all the Liberty social media sites and web pages and whatnot, everybody's spoken up about this in some sort of fashion. When most of them are basically saying, screw Arvin, he needs to quit. And no, dude, you don't need to quit the party just because you speak your mind and you have a different opinion than everybody else. Call individuality, folks. Thank you for taking the time to take my call.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, couple of things that me and you have in common is we both have a lot of people that feel like we should just quit the Libertarian Party for whatever reason. Speaking our mind pretty much is what it boils down to. I'm a regional director for Region 5 here in Washington State for the Washington State Libertarian Party. And there's just a lot of people that don't like what I do, and they've told me that I'm detrimental to the party. And when I saw what, just the backlash that you got, it just really, really, really reminded me of all that. It's kind of ridiculous because the way I see it, like, for one thing, I went and looked on YouTube, couldn't find a single video about the whole situation on YouTube, not a one. I went and I Googled your name and hit the news, couldn't find anything about, like, this at all. So, like, the only people that are really freaking out about this is libertarians. And from what I've noticed, it's what I feel anyways, is after this last election, we got so many people that joined the party. A lot of them happen to be Republicans, and a lot of Republicans, for lack of a better term, they're bootlickers. And they just don't like any criticism of the military at all. So that's what I saw. For people that are listening to my show that don't know, tell us what happened.
So I can summarize the events of the last couple of weeks, the last few days, which is that I was very open and possibly a little too blunt in my criticism of the military, as well as my view that those who serve in the military are in some ways culpable. And realistically, I mean, some of the word choice may have been a little bit too incendiary. I mean, even if accurate, it may have been a little too incendiary. I did see, and what I don't want to say surprised, because not surprised here, but what I was happy to see was that there was essentially two groups that responded. There are some people that said, listen, this is a little bit inflammatory, maybe you can phrase it differently. And to those groups, I don't really have a problem with that. But I saw a lot of groups that said, listen, the military is really good, they're doing the right thing, we need to be in all these places, we can't bring the troops home, we need to keep on doing this. And I saw a lot of that. And I'm still seeing a lot. I'm getting text messages, Facebook messages on a fairly regular basis, you could say, that then indicate that. And so people have taken great umbrage to, for example, my argumentation that we should really be working to help young people find other ways to pursue real honor through honorable missions, rather than to try to find unreal honor. I mean, it's true that the motivations are often quite good, as I posted earlier today, but when you have good motivations and those are perverted for corrupted aims, for missions that have no advantage, no benefit, no end goal, no real relation to defense, we end up with a really problematic situation. That's something that I think that it's important for the liberty movement, Libertarian Party, to work against. And I know there's a lot of people out there who strongly believe that we need to have a big giant military everywhere. I am not one of those people.
Neither am I. And it seemed like, like right up to, it was about May 8th, it looked like just normal run-of-the-mill libertarian Facebook posts, run the gamut of all sorts of things. May 8th, the last thing was like, books beat school, which I totally agree with. It kind of was it the America's last offensive war was the War of 1812? Was that what popped everything off?
No. The original, the first sort of rumblings, if you will, of this discussion came when I shared an image from the Anarchy Ball Facebook page, in which the makers of the page had taken an image of General Petraeus, and he is, in my opinion, somebody who is very much responsible for many of the negative missions. He's not just an enlisted soldier, he's a major leader, and he shares a high amount of culpability. And in this image, it showed all his medals, and the medals were labeled with things like, the medal for drone strikes, medal for bombing weddings. I mean, it was very, very sarcastic. And many people in the military, many people who had served in the military, were very offended by this post. Not because they thought that the general was a good person, but that because they themselves had similar medals. And I talked with many, many people on Facebook privately on this issue. And it really came to a head to see, many people talked about how their lives, their psychologies, their psyches had been destroyed by being part of this. How they were just ashamed of what they'd done. And I heard other people that were very proud of what they'd done. It's not a universal thing. But I talked to many people who felt so betrayed by the way that the military had misused them. And the reason that that this particular image, which was, it's just it was not my own image, it was an image that I shared that I thought that was sort of funny. But the yeah, I mean, Anarchy Ball, I think, puts out a lot of really interesting, really good stuff. And so what many people said, that listen, when you're in the military, they take so much from you. They take so much of who you are. You're going in there, you're trying to give them the best parts of yourself. You know what I mean? I mean, we all have good parts and bad parts, and that's a fact. I mean, we have laziness in us, we have selfishness in us, we have honor in us, we have courage in us, we have lying. We have all these parts. But when people enlist in the military, they're trying to give the military not just themselves, but the best parts of themselves. And when the military uses those best parts for purpose that these same people later consider immoral, it hurts them in a very cold, in a very cruel way, in a very personal way. And many people said that when the military does this to you, and they take so much from you, sometimes it's like the medals are kind of all that's left. And when you attack or deride that last little piece, that piece that says that, yes, this overall thing was bad, but in that tiny moment, in that one moment, I did something that at the micro level was heroic. I saved somebody, which is in that moment heroic. I was wounded trying to help somebody. I did something positive. Even if the whole thing as an aggregate was negative, but in that moment I did something positive, and that's something that I'm holding on to. That really hurt them in a very intense way. And in that messaging, something had started to come out to me, which is that I was seeing a level of what I would call military worship, which is an unconsidered, automatic, blind respect for anything the military does, whether it's good or bad. And I saw that emerging, and I said that is, this is one post. It's a post I could take down. I mean, it's not like this highly significant thing. If people are offended by a post, I take posts down all the time. That's not a big deal to me. But when I saw that we have become a party that is so afraid to say anything at all negative about what I consider to be one of the most destructive institutions on the planet, that we are allowing them to use veterans as kind of like a PR shield. They're saying, well, you can't attack the military because if you do that, you're attacking soldiers. That when I saw that happening, I said to myself, this is a big issue at the center of the soul and psychology of this party, and this is a fight that we need to have. We need to have this discussion. The idea that, I talked to Doug Craig, who's a veteran, and he said, he's a very anti-war veteran, and he says, he said that, he's like, listen, I'm often bothered when somebody says, I've done this many tours or whatever, they're running for some kind of office, local office, state office, whatever, a federal office, and when people say, oh, this person's did all these tours, that's really good, it's really cool, we should support that guy. And he said that he's very troubled by this. I mean, he said that what he said to me is, like, when I say that I was in the military, that doesn't make me special. If anything, that makes me unspecial, because I was part of the military-industrial complex. Now, the other things that I've done outside of it can make, or that a person that's outside can make a person special. And so I really fundamentally believe that military worship is dangerous to us as a party, but it's also dangerous to society, because we're encouraging, we're talking about 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that are seeing this military worship, and they're like, well, who wouldn't want that? And so there's those two parts really made me feel that we have to have this debate, and the sooner we have it, the better. To have this debate, and the sooner we have it, the better.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's a point where if you're in a party that's like fundamentally anti-war and anti-force, At what point do you keep on supporting the military for just doing their job, or it being completely honorable when they're just not being used for honorable purposes anymore, and they're just basically being sold out to the corporations for whatever war they need to be doing today? And it seems to me like we just have this never-ending quota of brown folks over in some other continent that we got to kill every generation. That's just that's just part of the American way, our imperialism, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very true. There's, so many people I've spoken to who are either in the military or just in the military-industrial complex. Remember I lived in D.C., and yes, we interact a lot with people in the military part of the military-industrial complex. And I also interact with a lot of people in the industrial part of the military-industrial complex. A lot of people who I know they work as defense contracting firms. People who I know work as lobbyists for defense contracting firms. These are the people that the Libertarian Party would say that is as evil as it gets. And as diplomatically as I can, which is often not that diplomatically, I do bring that forward to people. And I say, you have these talents, you have this charisma, you have these engineering skills, and I'm not going to say that everything I've ever done in my life is perfect, but that's far from true. I've done, as I mentioned today on Facebook, there's been times where, sometimes we're talking to the military, these are people who are doing, bad things, but for good motivation. And you have capitalism, where people often are doing good things, but maybe for bad motivation. They're just selfish, but they end up doing something good. But there's been times in my life where I've done bad things for bad reasons. There's nothing mitigating about it at all. I'm not saying that I'm some kind of perfect person, that I've never done something wrong. The important difference to me is knowing that this thing had bad motivation and bad action, or this other thing had a good motivation but a bad. It's important to know that, to be honest with yourself. And so I've said to many people that you can do, or you can try to do, or you can at least know in your heart that this is not the best. That this is not the best thing. That if this is necessary right now for your survival, I'm not going to try to judge you, but I'm going to say that this is not a good thing. That there is something better that you can do. That you should be looking for that. I will help you look for that, because if you have the skills, honestly, if you have the skills to be a weapons engineer, that's a high skill level. You probably have the skills to do at least one other thing that doesn't involve using your God-given skills for something so perverted. So I really believe that there is an individual component to the military-industrial complex. It's not just an abstract thing. So a veteran wrote me earlier today saying it's important to call out that while it is important to say that, if you're to admit that people who are 15, 16, 17 that are being taken advantage of, there is a moral issue there. But there is realistically a bigger moral issue when you have a 40-year-old engineer, totally comfortable, not trying to get out of a small town, he's not following some family tradition, he's not being tricked by military recruits about honor and all that kind of stuff. At that point, that's a person that also has some real culpability. That's something that we really need to talk about. And so I do strongly believe that this culpability is not purely a military thing, but it is an individual thing. It's a party of individual responsibility. I believe we need to think of that as a very serious individual responsibility.
I believe we need to think of that as a very serious individual.
What's your response to the people that say that you are detrimental to the party?
What's your response to the people that say that you are detrimental to the party and that you should just step down?
There are many people that believe that this kind of messaging is detrimental. I don't know if it is. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I fundamentally don't know. A long time ago, in my a little bit earlier days in politics, I started to realize, and this was my first campaign, I tried to do, in my first campaign running for Maryland House of Delegates, I tried to do what was safe. I played a very safe campaign. I didn't talk about anything that I considered incendiary. So, for example, I didn't talk about any more. I did talk about legalizing medical marijuana. I didn't talk about getting rid of in Maryland they put up traffic cameras, which I think are just the most immoral form of taxation. It's taxation masquerading as punishment. It's this theft pretending to be a righteous punishment. It is, to me, one of the most evil forms of taxation. But I put that in there because I took advice from a lot of people that said you don't want to antagonize people. Now, what was interesting is from the people, various friends, family members who were working at the polls, that on actual election day, many of the people would actually bring up that issue. It wasn't in any of my campaign materials, none of my campaign signs, nothing. But they would bring up that issue, the one issue that people said, that sounds so silly, or that sounds so wrong, don't bring it up ever. It's going to just make people mad. And that was the issue where people were like, yeah, because you told me that, I'm voting for him. And so what I realized is this: I don't know much about political strategy. I've written about political strategy. I've analyzed political strategy after the fact. I wrote a book called Why Hillary Lost that explained why Trump's very unconventional strategy worked, or why Hillary's very traditional strategy did not.
Yeah.
But that's like an after the fact thing. What I realized a long time ago is I don't know what's going to work. I don't know what set of words is going to, either in my personal life or political life or business life, I don't know what set of words is going to, make me the most money or get the most. I don't know that. We can speculate about that all day long. We could even engage in some kind of double-blind, placebo-controlled market test. We can do all kinds of things. But the thing is, even if we have a market study of 500 people, maybe people act differently when there's a million. Who knows? So I don't know that. I don't think anyone in the Libertarian Party does. I know many of them claim to, but I have yet to see any real evidence. But what I do know is, while I cannot predict what's going to be the most strategic thing, I found it much easier to figure out what's the right thing. And to me, the number one component of what makes something either right or wrong, especially in politics, is whether it's honest or dishonest, whether it's true or false. I get that if you're doing outreach to people in the military and you say, my favorite thing in the whole world is the military, go military, rah, rah, military, that it's probably going to make the outreach to the military easier. I get that. It is probably at the same time going to make outreach to other groups much harder. We can look very simply right now in the libertarian movement, even among anarcho-capitalists who are the supposed hardest core, the hardcore libertarians, and they don't vote libertarian. Now, we can't outdo outreach to anarcho-capitalists. Clearly, we're not 100% perfect on the messaging. Now, I'm not saying that being anti-war is going to help us with ANCAPs. That's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point that I'm trying to make is, it's true that specific things will make an initial appeal to specific groups easier, and if a group is used to being put on a pedestal, keeping them on that pedestal, it's probably going to make initial outreach easier. But we have to play the long game here. And the long game here is that when, a few months from now, a few years from now, that kid who is, lied to and told all these, stories by recruiters, or watch those just bizarre military recruiting videos where they show you fighting a dragon or whatever. At some point, I talked to yesterday. I had a very long conversation with Craig, who's he's a Libertarian Party Radical Caucus member. He's a libertarian. He's a libertarian candidate. Yeah, and he said, listen, they show you these videos of the dragons and whatnot because they're not going to show you the real thing of you scrubbing toilets for 14 days in a row. They're not going to show you the real story about how they're just artificially treating the enlisted men worse for no good reason. They're not going to show you the truth. They're not going to show you these experiences. And he talked about so many of experiences, and he actually posted about it on Facebook. I strongly recommend everybody look at it. But he talked about these things. But the point is, there are people who are going through that process of waking up at any given point. And at first, if you tell somebody the truth, and I've told a lot of people a lot of truths. I'm an educator, that's what I do. And a lot of times I tell people truths that they don't want to hear. That is part of my day-to-day job. It is part of my business, and sometimes it makes my business harder. There are times when I lose clients because I view that my fundamental responsibility as an educator, my first responsibility above anything else, is to the truth. There are times when I've lost clients, sometimes permanently, usually not permanently. Usually the things that I say that they find very difficult to swallow. A few months, a few years go by, I get an email, I get a call that says, listen, I didn't want to hear what you were saying at the time. It's starting to make a lot more sense to me now. And the same thing is going to be true if you make the truth your North Star. If you tell the truth about a thing, when people start to realize the truth, even if they hate you at first, even if they hate you after because you brought them the truth, at the very least, now they know that you are somebody that they can trust. You know that and that is a critical part of politics. People think that politics is all about pandering. That's all about, you know, and it is about empathy. I think empathy is very important in politics, but empathy taken to the point of pandering is not helpful. When people are doing that, saying that's what you need to do, they're actually going backwards. They're not doing any kind of good long-term marketing. They're not doing anything that's going to build a party in any kind of real way over a long period of time. So I would, you know, encourage people to, however, as tactfully as you can or as untactfully as you need to find a way to communicate with people frankly and openly and honestly. It's much easier to know what's right than to know what's definitely going to work in a highly volatile, constantly changing, basically unknowable. One of the things that I did want to make clear, and I tried to make clear earlier today, and you know I can certainly make clear on your show, I don't want people who serve in the military or people who have served in the military to think that I despise them or that I hate them or that I want to get them out of the libertarian movement or out of the Libertarian Party, or that I think they're subhuman, or that I think that people should be spitting on them, because I don't think any of those things. That's not what I think at all. If anybody's read my comment to believe that I believe in that kind of mistreatment and is planning on thinks that that's something that I'm endorsing, I'm not. So if you know those who support my ideas, that is not something that I support. I don't believe in treating people that way no matter what. But what I do believe is recognizing the parts of what a person, the things that they've done that are good, the motivation they've had that are good or bad, the decisions that they've made that were right or wrong, the institutions that they've supported that are good or bad, the compromise that they made. I mean, sometimes you have to make a compromise. Like realistically today, if you want to save drowning swimmers in the ocean, the most realistic way to do that today is to join the Coast Guard. But once you're in the Coast Guard, you now have a moral imperative to try to start to work for free market versions of the Coast Guard. Just as we have AAA to cover the entire many, many, many miles of roads and many other competing services, we can have the same on the open seas. Here's the difference. I can't imagine that a free market version of the Coast Guard would waste all of its income and revenue on drug enforcement. Right now, the Coast Guard does the majority, financially speaking, of drug enforcement in America. Now, that doesn't mean that a person who wants to rescue drowning swimmers should never join the Coast Guard. That's not the point that I'm trying to make here. The point that I'm trying to make is be very careful what organization you are supporting. Look at all the things that they do, not just some of the things. Be frank and open about the things that they do that are good and the things that they do that are problematic. And find ways to improve that. If you're part of an organization, it is part of your responsibility to that organization to try to improve it. I do that with the Libertarian Party in the ways that I know best. I do that in my own business. I'm constantly trying to find ways to make what we do better. And sometimes those are technical concerns, but often they're actually concerns of principle, concerns of morality, things that really lie at the heart of what I believe is important in education. And there are times where I've lost my way in my own business. I mean, when you're dealing with like high-end, private education, when there's a lot of money at stake, people will often do or adjust their model towards things that they might not agree with, and that's a hard thing. I get that. I understand that pull, but it is still an imperative, in my opinion, to try to improve things. So my personal business, it's called Vora Method. It's a private free market education service. It's a very unusual service because it functions very individualized, like private tutoring, and yet it happens in a group setting. That makes it much more affordable than private tutoring usually is. I mean, our private tutoring rates are 7 or 8 times as high as our group class rates, But our group classes are on par, and it's a fascinating area, and we're innovating all the time. We develop apps to help our program. We have scripts on our side, and everything we do, by the way, is live. It's not like Khan Academy where everything's pre-recorded. Although I fully support everything that Khan Academy does, it's just a different model, and what works for us is that very live, constant, really present interaction. So my current term ends in 2018. Those who whether you support me or oppose me, I recommend that you come to the convention, and I also recommend that you come to the discussion of platform and bylaws. I know people think that having this debates and discussion is like some sort of very toxic infighting, and if you look at the actual culture of the actual Libertarian Party, you'll see that's not true. We debate all the time. We debate furiously. We debate vitriolically. We argue points of the platform with a lot of passion, and sometimes those are passions about the principles. When I was first got involved in national politics, I very, very hotly debated the educational issues, and some of the things in the platform now are different because of that. And you'll see that a lot of people are going to very hotly and very aggressively debate punctuation. That's also fun. That's part of the culture. We're not trying to hate each other. We're just trying to get it right. And that's something that I encourage you all to do. I really encourage everyone, both the people who support me and the people who hate me and all that kind of stuff. I strongly encourage you to get involved at that level. Really come to that national convention in 2018. It's going to be an incredible experience. There's nothing like a Libertarian National Convention.
I'm not scared.